This is Big Podcast.
Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. You want to make more money with your podcast, get more people to it, spread a message, have people talk about your podcast with other people, do your marketing for you. You're in the right place. My name is David Hooper. BigPodcast.com is the website. This is a podcast about podcasting. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I don't need another podcast about podcasting. This one's different. I'm talking about psychology. I'm talking about old school marketing techniques that still work. We're doing them in a new school way. This isn't all about tech. This isn't all about where to plug which microphone into, what the best microphone is. We're going to talk about that a little bit when it comes up. But I believe that the best microphone is the one that you've got. We're going to start there because if you don't have all this other stuff in order, it doesn't matter what kind of equipment that you've got to get your message in order. Everything that I talk about here, it will be linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is the audio version of that newsletter. If you want the newsletter in writing, delivered to you every Friday, New York time, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Speaking of your message, how many times have you had a guest on and the guest will hijack the interview? Have you ever had that happen? If you haven't, you're not doing enough interviews. Sometimes you get these guys, they've got an agenda. And you've probably been pitched by these folks. They're the ones who seem to not care that your podcast is about X when they're talking about Y. They're going to make it fit. Usually the signs are there, but sometimes you'll miss them. You'll take a punt on a guest, and that guest comes in and hijacks it. I had a funny meme about this, posted this on my Facebook. And if you're interested in connecting with me there, you've got questions about podcasting, here's the URL. It's facebook.com/bigpodcaster. You can join the conversation about hijacking. Just yesterday, I posted something about the professional podcast promoters. Another group that you're hearing a lot from, you're going to connect with this. Facebook.com/bigpodcaster if we are not already connected. Hey, I want to thank you for support of my new book, 101 Podcast Episode Templates. I just finished edits on the audiobook version. Actually, the book itself, the audiobook version of that has been done, but I wanted to add some bonus content, so I did. It took me a little longer to get it out. It has been submitted to the distributor. It should be available wherever you get your audiobooks in the next couple of weeks. If you want to stay updated, make sure you subscribe. bigpodcast.com/subscribe. I'll keep you updated. Something I talked about in this issue of Big Podcast Insider, it's very important. It's something very easy that you can do to get more people engaged with your podcast because it makes it more stimulating to listeners. And that is having more voices on your podcast. Literally, more voices, different sounds. We find that stimulating as humans. This is one of the reasons why interview format podcasts get more downloads than solo format podcasts. One of the reasons people shy away from interviews, though, is because interviews, frankly, especially remote interviews, they could be a pain. People aren't set up for them. There's a technological issue a lot of times. Your potential guest, they've never been on podcasts maybe. Maybe they're like my mom, have that blinking 12 on the VCR. Remember that? There's a learning curve. Well, there's a learning curve to being a guest on a podcast as well. We take it for granted because we are behind the mic all the time. Riverside FM, it's very intuitive. It's super easy to use. Your guests don't need to install anything. It works on Chrome. Everybody's got Chrome. That's how you browse the web. It's as easy as clicking on a link. And that's what you do. You simply send your guest a link. They join the Riverside studio from their browser. Everything is recorded locally. You don't even need a great internet connection, honestly. Just a basic internet connection will do. A lot of times people talk about plugging in. No, man, you don't need to plug in. Not with this. Wireless. Go wireless. Do it. Take your laptop in the closet. Get that good mic. All those clothes hanging up. It's going to make you sound like you're in a studio. Riverside makes it easy. Right now, I've got an offer for you. You can try Riverside free. And if you stick around, it's going to be 15% off. Riverside FM. Use the code BIGPODCAST. That's one word, BIGPODCAST, Big Podcast. You'll get 15% off any membership plan if you decide to stick around. Go to riverside.fm. Try it first. It is free. Let me know how it works for you. It's going to make it easier for you to capture these different voices. Keep your listeners stimulated. Riverside.fm, the code Big Podcast. I will have more information in the episode notes. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I go through so many different items on these Big Podcast Insider episodes. When you hear this sound, that's how you know I'm going to the next one. Let's do it. There are 38 types of secrets. You are likely keeping at least one of them. And you're an honest guy, right? Well, according to Michael Slepian, Leadership and Ethics at Columbia University, that's what's happening. You are keeping at least one secret from the people around you. That means your listeners are also keeping secrets. I've got a list. It's 38 different secrets that will give you lots of ideas for segments, episodes, and shows themselves. Let's dive in and talk about them. Illegal drug use. How many people have used illegal drugs? Or abuse of a legal drug, alcohol, painkillers, a lot of people. Habit, addiction, not involving drugs, maybe food, Pornhub, I don't know. A lot of different bad habits out there, a lot of different addictions. That's a secret that people keep. Something illegal other than drugs or theft, physical self-harm. I know people that cut themselves. It's common, man. And I'm saying this not to make light of it, but people keep it a secret. They feel like they're all alone. So if you can go to these people and say, look, you're not alone. You're not the only person doing this. They're going to be relieved. They're going to feel known. And making your listeners feel known, that's one of the biggest gifts that you can give them. That's why I'm talking about this. Abortion, that's a huge one. We're talking a lot about that in the United States right now. A lot of people have been through abortion. A traumatic experience, a lie, a violation of someone's trust, other than a lie. Romantic desire while single. Crush, that's a secret. Romantic discontent. You're unhappy with a relationship, but you're not going to tell your spouse or your partner. Extra relational thoughts about having a relationship with another person while in a relationship. Emotional infidelity, sexual infidelity, a relationship with someone who is cheating on someone else to be with you. Social discontent, physical discontent, mental health struggles. I've got the full list at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Again, I'm talking about using this stuff to help people who are listening to you, letting them feel understood. So don't let this statistic depress you. It simply shows that people are human, and all of us, we're working through something. It's a good opportunity for you to use your podcast to help people in those situations. It's one of the best things about podcasting is it's anonymous, more or less. I mean, somebody might see you pull something up on your iPhone if you're listening that way. Most of the time, though, nobody sees what we're listening to. They don't hear it. We're listening through headphones. We're listening alone in a car. This is a good way to connect people, build your audience, making people feel known. I've got 38 of these secrets. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. By the way, a few issues back, issue 78, I talked about people confessing secrets. That's really powerful. Not only telling people that they're not alone, but showing them by having other listeners get in on this. I'm telling you, look at this list. You're going to think of a ton of ideas for your show and maybe even an entirely different show. You've been warned. If you go to this list and you start 5 different podcasts, don't blame me. Next up, 7 types of videos to market yourself and your podcast. If you are worried about doing video that isn't as polished as your podcast, I've got a guy who's got an interesting outlook that you may want to consider. If you've read the Big Podcast book, you know about the rule of they zig, you zag. In short, for this example, it means that when everybody else is doing polished videos with great lighting, great production, and that's hard to compete with, you flip that on its head and you do short, to the point, iPhone-only videos. Your iPhone has a great camera. It's not that bad. The biggest issue you're going to have on that is your sound, but you're a podcaster. You know how to record your voice. Anyway, flip those professional videos on their head. Sometimes those short, non-professional videos, that's going to connect even better. It's not flashy, but it's a great technique for your audience because they're interested in the behind-the-scenes element of what you do. I love the teaser format. That's something that I use to help build excitement for what's about to come. By the way, let me go back to riverside.fm. They've got an editor where you can go through your podcast, chop up what you've done, use it for your social media. That's a teaser. Maybe it's not the normal way you even release your content. That makes it interesting, seeing the behind the scenes of how something is done. You got an audio-only podcast, sometimes it helps to release a quick video just to show how it's done. When I tell people that I'm in my closet, and it's not a closet like with clothes, like I was talking about earlier. It's a tricked out closet. I had an electrician wire it up. It's got foam. It's got these huge sound panels. It's got a rack full of gear, broadcast mic, booms. People are like, what? Really? You did that to a 5x8 closet? Yeah, I did. And it sounds great. People want to see it. That's the behind the scenes stuff that I'm talking about. Even an iPhone shot, even these quick videos. When I throw that up on Instagram, people love it. By the way, if you want to see that on Instagram, Big Podcast 1 is the username, Big Podcast numeral 1. 5 negative podcast mindsets. How many times have you seen these articles? Forbes, Entrepreneur, Inc. 5 mindsets to be happier. 5 mindsets to be a better podcaster. 5 mindsets, blah, blah. We see this all the time. So I was skeptical when I saw this. My buddy Joe Saul-Sehy from Stacking Benjamins posted it, though. I said, I like Joe. I trust him. He had something called 5 mindsets that can wreck your judgment. I said, all right, I'm going to click on it. I was surprised. This is not your typical clickbait article. It's not rehashed info that you've heard a million times before. Maybe some of it you're going to connect to, but it was definitely said in a different way for me. I found myself saying, yeah, I fall into that. These distorted mindsets. I've got it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com, but I'm going to talk a little bit about them right now. He says mind reading. Mind reading happens when we assume we know what the other person is thinking or feeling. That can get us into trouble. If you're in sales, and who isn't? We're all in sales. You probably have experienced this. Think, they don't want it. You give up too easily. Let somebody tell you no. Let somebody tell you yes. Mind reading happens when we assume we know what the other person is thinking or feeling. This happens in our podcast. That's why you want to have a conversation with your listeners. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What do you want me to podcast about? Don't just assume that. Mental filtering, that makes you pay attention to a small set of observations and ignore all others. Labeling, using dismissive words that caricature one's thinking and feelings about situations and people. Blame. In this mental distortion, you assign blame to yourself or to others, while the true case for the problem may lie elsewhere. Also, all or nothing thinking. Someone is either a hero or a zero. A certain choice is either perfect or totally flawed. I did this for years. You might think about this with your podcast. But something that changed this for me, I've done a lot of different projects over the years. And there's some that I look back on, 10, 20 years ago. And I've got to look at it and say, I helped a lot of people with that project. A lot of people read that book. A lot of people listened to that music. That project made a lot of money. Even if it's not perfect, doesn't mean that it has value. That's one of the reasons that these 5 things connected with me. I've got them linked, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. 6 types of podcasts you can start publishing today. I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks doing promotion for the new book, 101 Podcast Episode Templates. These interviews that I'm doing, writing things about it, it's got me talking a lot about various frameworks for podcast segments, episodes, and shows. This is something that can be combined with what I talked about earlier, with the secrets that people are keeping. Reporting. Podcasts with a journalistic lens. The value proposition for reporting podcasts is often a unique viewpoint or exclusive coverage readers can't find anywhere else. If you've got boots on the ground in Ukraine, that's a unique perspective on a reporting podcast. You're not going to get that from an office in New York. Analysis. These podcasts are typically run by narrowly defined subject matter experts. Their content is often long form, including charts or graphs, and presents an opinionated take on the topic at hand. That's this podcast, Build a Big Podcast. For 3 decades, I've been doing marketing. I'm given a very specific slant on marketing via audio. It's analysis. And this episode specifically, it is also number 3, curation. As the volume of content on the internet continues to grow exponentially, tastemakers with podcasts who can help listeners sort through the noise are finding themselves in high demand. If you can curate information, basically being a filter for all the information that is coming to you, and there's a lot of it, giving your audience just the best of what you have found, that alone is great. But you combine it with analysis, even better. Number 4, artistic. These types of podcasts tend to be built around a single creator where the main value given to listeners is the creator's unique perspective. You can see how all these blend together. 5, practical. Practical podcasts have one of the most straightforward value propositions for listeners. Subscribe to blank and learn how to do blank. Is that you? If I listen to you, am I going to learn something like that? Good. Practical. That's perfect. That stuff's great for YouTube. How many times have you gone to YouTube? How to change a faucet. Just me? Okay. All right, 6. This is what I talked about just a minute ago. Hybrid. These podcasts combine the best elements from any of the other types in order to create something truly unique. It doesn't have to be just 2 of these types. You can combine 2 or more. Sometimes you've got a podcast with different episodes. This episode is curated. I'm talking about different things that I've found online or have been sent to me. I'm giving you my opinion on them. Some of the other episodes, some of the interview episodes that I've got, not so much. We're not curating anything. We're creating new content. Regardless, these formats, they'll work for newsletters. They will work for your podcast. I've got more information and the link to the entire article, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Let's talk more about the guest hijack. There are two kinds of podcasters: those who've had a guest hijack an interview and those who will have a guest hijack an interview. We've all been there, or we will be. You ask a question to your guest, you get a sales pitch. You get an answer to a question, but not the question you asked. Or the guest asks you a question, then he answers his own question. To bring this thing full circle, I talked about the funny meme that I've got. It's on the Facebook page, facebook.com/bigpodcaster. It's my personal Facebook page. Come interact with me and other podcasters, put up a lot of fun stuff, like a dumb mistake that I made last week. This is crazy. I'm on a group call, a lot of people on there. Can't find out when my sound's not working. What do you think the problem was? Me. I just switched out my interface, so I checked out the new interface, checked out the cables, checked out my settings, checked out the interface again. Had to switch out mics, switch out computers. And as it turned out, it was a switch on the mic. And I never use this switch. I normally don't use microphones that have switches, but live and learn. Anyway, if you're interested in discussions like that, things that will make you a better podcast host, you want to do it in between Build a Big Podcast episodes, go there, facebook.com/bigpodcaster. Everything that I've talked about on this episode, all the articles, the special offer for you to try Riverside FM free, and then if you like it, get 15% off. It's linked, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. If you just happened upon this podcast, you're not subscribed yet, let me tell you how to do that. That will make sure that you never miss an episode. You know what happened on the last newsletter? Gave my book away for free. That's the kind of thing that you get when you subscribe to the newsletter, when you subscribe to this podcast. And here's how you do it. bigpodcast.com/subscribe. There are 3 buttons there, one for iPhone, one for Android. If you like RSS, I've got one for RSS. Click the button that you want. One click is all it takes. You are subscribed. And I hope you'll continue to be subscribed. I'd love to hear from you about what you're doing with your podcast. I'd love to interact with you, showcase you on this podcast, on the social media, within the newsletter, maybe even in the book. I got a place for you, man. bigpodcast.com. Go there right now before you forget. Get it locked in, and I'll see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.